She says one thing but means another, flips the script mid-argument, brings up last year like it happened yesterday, and somehow, by the end, you're the villain for trying to keep the peace. You're not overreacting, you're waking up. The truth is, arguing with a woman in today's world is one of the fastest ways to lose your frame, your respect, and your sanity, because it's not about logic, it's about leverage. Every word you say gets twisted, every point you make becomes another weapon, and the more you try to explain yourself, the more she watches you unravel. You're stuck in a cycle that strips you of your confidence. You feel exhausted, unheard, confused, walking on eggshells while being blamed for the broken glass. But what if I told you the real power is in doing the exact opposite of what you've been taught? What if I told you that silence is strength? Detachment is leadership, and walking away isn't weakness, it's freedom. Comment, I choose peace if you're done living in emotional war zones. And if you're ready to reclaim your frame and live by unshakable principles, stay locked in. This will transform the way you see yourself and life itself. Number 1. Silence wins battles. You wake up one morning and she's cold, passive-aggressive, barely looking at you, and you know deep down something's off. You ask, she says it's nothing, but her energy is screaming everything. That gut feeling starts to claw at your chest, and suddenly you're in this mental loop trying to figure out what you did wrong, what went unsaid, where the landmines are. So you press, you talk, you try to fix. You raise your voice a little when she gaslights you or pretends nothing's happening, and now, boom, it's your fault. You're the one overreacting. You just handed her the power without realizing it. Most men make this mistake every single day, believing that the solution is more communication, more explaining, more trying to be understood. But what if I told you that your power lies not in the words you say, but in the words you withhold? When you remain calm and grounded in the middle of emotional chaos, you don't just preserve your energy, you weaponize your stillness. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern society has lied to you. It has told you that the more you talk, the more connected you are, that real men open up during every disagreement, that sharing how you feel in every moment is strength. But what they never told you is that when you're constantly explaining yourself to someone who's not listening, you start to doubt your own clarity. You become addicted to being heard by someone who isn't even trying to understand you. That's not love. That's emotional dependence dressed up as connection. Silence is not retreat. It's resistance. It's the refusal to be pulled into a dynamic where you're forced to prove your worth over and over again. Every time you don't react to a petty jab or a dramatic accusation, you are choosing yourself. You are choosing dignity over dysfunction. And here's what they don't tell you. She respects the man who doesn't argue more than the one who fights for attention. She respects the man who doesn't explain more than the one who pleads for peace. Why? Because that man shows he's not seeking approval. He's already whole. If you want to transform your relationships, your emotional life, and your identity as a man, you have to start seeing silence not as the absence of communication, but as the presence of power. Imagine this. She tries to provoke you with a comment meant to sting, something like, "Maybe you care more about work than me." You feel the reaction rising up in your throat, that desperate need to clarify, to defend your name, but instead, you pause. You breathe. You look at her, not with fear, not with frustration, but with composure. You say nothing. You give no explanation. You leave the room and return to your work. That moment isn't weakness, it's control. It's you choosing not to water weeds. Because men who need to win arguments are still seeking validation. Men who stay silent are focused on outcomes. She may huff. She may try harder to pull you back into the chaos. She may even cry. But what she won't do is forget that you didn't fold. Over time, that memory becomes respect. And if she can't respect your silence, she never respected your voice. There are going to be days where you feel the need to explain your heart, your intentions, your reasons for setting boundaries. Resist it. If someone can't recognize your character without explanation, they're not ready for your truth. Start building your life in a way that makes arguing unnecessary. Let your actions do the speaking. Build your body, build your finances, build your mind. And when the arguments come, you'll have the power to walk away, not out of anger, but out of indifference to drama. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects who she really is. And most of the time, that's the one thing she can't handle. That's the test. Will you lose yourself trying to be understood, or will you find yourself in the stillness of restraint? The more you talk, the more room you give for manipulation, for shifting the narrative, for emotional entanglement. But silence exposes everything. It forces the other person to sit with their own behavior. And if she changes, she was worth it. If she doesn't, your silence just saved you years of emotional torment. This is your awakening. Every time you hold back from engaging in emotional warfare, you take back another piece of your power. And power, real power, doesn't yell, it doesn't chase, it doesn't beg. It stands firm, it walks away, and it never ever argues with someone committed to misunderstanding it. You're not here to win debates, you're here to win your peace back. Don't waste another second feeding dysfunction with your voice. Let your silence be the sword that cuts through every lie, every test, every trap. Start today. When the bait is laid out in front of you, smile internally, remind yourself who you are, and walk away. Because that's not avoidance, that's mastery. And men who master silence, master life. Truth like this, it doesn't stay public forever. That's why I created the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, a private, powerful ebook linked in the comments, built for men who are done guessing, done suffering, done explaining. If you've ever asked yourself, why do I always lose myself in these arguments? Or how do I take back control without losing her or myself? This is your answer. No games, just timeless, powerful, Stoic-based truths you'll own for life. Once it's yours forever. A permanent guide to emotional strength, peace, and purpose that you can revisit anytime in any season of life. Don't miss your chance. Click the link, grab it, and start mastering the power that silence gives you. Number 2, don't feed her fire. You're sitting across from her and she brings up something from 6 months ago, twisting it into a weapon, her voice getting louder, her words sharper, her tone laced with condescension. And in that split second, you feel your blood pressure rise, your fists clench slightly under the table, your mind screaming, that's not what happened. You want to interrupt, correct, defend, win. But what you don't see is the trap that's just been set. The more you engage, the more you react, the more fuel you throw into a fire that was never meant to be put out, only stoked. This is how so many men lose themselves in relationships, not because they're weak or emotional, but because they don't realize the argument isn't about resolution. It's about power, control, and your reaction. She doesn't need you to agree or even fix anything. She just needs you to bite. And the moment you do, she's got you. You're now emotional, tangled, off-center. And once she has you in that space, she can paint herself as the calm one, the rational one, the one who's just trying to talk, while you look like the aggressive, unstable, emotionally charged man society already assumes you are. Men are not taught how to disengage with dignity. They are taught to be good communicators, better listeners, and emotionally available. And yet those very traits become weapons in the hands of someone who sees your openness not as connection, but as an opportunity to manipulate. When you feed her fire, you lose not just the argument, you lose your frame, your direction, your identity. Imagine this. You're driving and she's going off about how you never spend enough time with her, even though you've been bending your schedule backward for weeks. You feel the urge to slam the brakes, argue point for point, remind her of every sacrifice, every hour, every effort. But what if instead you said nothing? What if you kept your eyes on the road, adjusted the rearview mirror, and simply responded with, "I'm not having this conversation while emotions are high. That one sentence, delivered without anger, without sarcasm, ends the performance. It creates a boundary, not because you're cold, but because you're controlled. And control is everything. Feeding her fire feels like doing something productive, like fighting for your truth. But in reality, it's like throwing punches underwater. You're expending effort, time, breath, and getting nowhere while drowning. You need to learn the art of emotional fasting. Just like the body heals in silence, so does the mind. The next time you're baited into an emotional trap, remind yourself, her chaos is not your invitation. You're not her emotional sponge. You're not her verbal punching bag. You are a man who controls what enters his mental space. This shift doesn't just change your relationships. It changes how you handle conflict everywhere. With co-workers, family, strangers, you begin to see through the provocation and focus on the principle. Is this pulling me into noise or aligning me with peace? Women respect boundaries more than explanations. She may test you harder when you stop feeding the fire. She may accuse you of being dismissive, of not caring, but deep down, something shifts. She realizes that her emotional leverage over you is gone, and once that power dynamic changes, so does the relationship. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone. You lead the emotional climate. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. This is not about being emotionless, it's about emotional strategy. The battlefield is not always physical, it's verbal, mental, spiritual. And the moment you learn not to react, you reclaim ground that generations of men have lost. Men today are raised without emotional discipline. They're taught that every feeling must be expressed, every accusation must be addressed. But the most dangerous man is the one who can stay calm in the fire, not because he doesn't feel it, but because he refuses to feed it. From this moment forward, every time you're triggered, pause, breathe. Say to yourself, her energy is not my responsibility. That's not cold, that's clarity. Start applying this now. When she gets loud, you get calm. When she gets erratic, you get steady. And when she gets manipulative, you get silent. Your job is not to extinguish her fire, it's to refuse to be burned by it. And the moment you stop giving her a reaction, you take back a part of yourself you didn't even know you lost. Because the truth is, you're not in a relationship if you're constantly explaining your intentions, defending your actions, justifying your feelings. That's a trial, not a connection. You're not a defendant in your own life. You're the judge. You decide what matters, what deserves a response, and what gets silence. And the more you practice this, the more you begin to attract peace, not conflict. Women who thrive on drama will fall away. Women who respect power will draw near. Because real men don't argue with chaos. They walk away from it, build something better, and let their peace do the talking. Number 3, stay in your frame. You're in the middle of a conversation that slowly morphs into confrontation, and suddenly you find yourself chasing her approval, defending something you didn't even do wrong, explaining details you barely remember just to keep the peace, and you don't realize it, but you've already lost, not the argument, but your frame. Your frame is everything. It's the invisible barrier between who you are and what you tolerate. It's your values, your purpose, your direction, your principles, your peace, your posture in life. And the moment you let someone pull you into a conversation, a dynamic or a vibe that goes against those values, you abandon your frame and step into theirs. That's when you lose respect. That's when you lose authority. That's when you start reacting instead of leading. A man in his frame doesn't need to explain why he won't argue. He doesn't need to justify why he chooses peace. He doesn't need to prove he's right because his truth isn't up for debate. The problem is, most men don't even know what their frame is. They've spent so long bending, compromising, adjusting, trying to be accepted, that they don't even know what it feels like to be grounded anymore. You ask them what they want from a relationship, and they say, peace. But the moment chaos arrives, they fold. That's not a man in frame. That's a man in survival mode. Staying in your frame means that no matter what storm she brings, you remain rooted. You don't raise your voice just because she does. You don't chase just because she walks away. You don't engage just because she provokes. You hold the line, not to dominate, but to lead. And leadership starts with standards. Not standards you only talk about, but ones you enforce with quiet, non-negotiable consistency. When she tests your patience by accusing you of not caring, when she pushes your buttons by bringing up old drama, when she questions your commitment because you won't argue back, you don't fold. You don't try to convince her otherwise. You don't debate love like it's a thesis. You simply say, "I'm not going to argue." If that's how you feel, you're entitled to it. Then you go back to your purpose. Because your purpose isn't her emotional roller coaster. Your purpose is your direction in life, your mission, your evolution. And any conversation that takes you off that path is a distraction. Frame is built in silence and proven in friction. Anyone can act stoic when things are calm, but real frame is tested when things go sideways. When she yells, when she manipulates, when she cries, when she blames. That's when most men abandon themselves. They start trying to fix her emotions. They start trying to explain their love. They start moving out of fear. And once fear enters the relationship, leadership dies. Staying in your frame means letting her be upset without taking it personally, letting her cry without scrambling to fix it, letting her distance herself without chasing. Why? Because you're not responsible for her feelings. You're responsible for your frame. You're responsible for staying centered in who you are, regardless of who she is in that moment. And ironically, the more you stay in frame, the more she feels safe, even if she resists it. Because no woman truly respects a man she can emotionally control. She may exploit him, she may use him, but she will never admire him. The man she admires is the one who doesn't flinch, who doesn't get pulled into the drama, who says what he means and means what he says, who doesn't beg for peace, but builds a life so peaceful that anyone who brings chaos either adapts or exits. You stay in your frame by knowing your values and never compromising them, even when it's uncomfortable. You stay in your frame by detaching from the need to be understood and focusing instead on being aligned. You stay in your frame by treating every emotional test as an opportunity to reinforce your foundation. And yes, that means sometimes you'll be accused of being cold, distant, unbothered. But you'd rather be misunderstood in strength than loved in weakness. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to impress anyone. Not because you're arrogant, but because you know who you are. That's frame. Imagine being in a disagreement with your woman and staying so composed, so unshaken, that she starts second-guessing the chaos she brought to you. That's frame. Imagine being able to walk away from any situation that disrespects your peace without feeling guilt, fear, or loss. That's frame. And every man needs to build it like his life depends on it, because it does. The world doesn't respect men who bend at every emotional outburst. The world respects men who stand firm in the storm, not to fight the wind, but to show they are unmoved by it. Build your frame through solitude, through discipline, through purpose. And when the tests come, and they will, you won't just survive them, you'll own them, because you'll no longer be reacting to life. You'll be directing it. That's how a man commands respect without saying a word. That's how a man stays in his frame. Number 4, logic never beats emotion. You sit her down, ready to talk things out like a rational adult, and you lay out the facts, where you were, what time, what happened, what didn't happen, how her assumptions don't line up, and you expect clarity to lead to closure. But instead, you get tears, silence, accusations, or worse, a complete shift in narrative. Now, you're not only defending yourself, but you're defending your tone, your timing, your lack of empathy. And suddenly you realize something terrifying. Facts don't matter here. Logic, as pure and noble as it is, doesn't penetrate emotion. It never has, and you trying to argue logic with emotion is like trying to dry a flood with paper towels. It's a losing game from the start. Most men approach relationship conflict like a courtroom. They think if they present enough evidence, enough data, enough bulletproof facts, they'll be exonerated. But relationships don't operate in that realm. Relationships, especially when emotions are high, live in a different dimension. One where feelings reign supreme and truth bends to perception. That doesn't mean you abandon truth. It means you stop trying to use truth to win feelings. And that's the distinction men must make if they want to keep their sanity and their dignity. You think she'll finally understand that you were just 5 minutes late because of traffic, not because you don't care. You think she'll realize that your silence wasn't punishment, but space to cool down. You think explaining your intentions will fix her interpretations. But what actually happens is the more you explain, the more she digs in. Because now it's not about the event, it's about how your explanation makes her feel invalidated. The more logic you use, the more she thinks you're avoiding how she feels. And now you're not just wrong, you're emotionally unavailable. This is the cycle that traps good men in hellish relationships, not because they're wrong, but because they're using the wrong tools. You don't use a calculator to fix a leaking pipe. You don't use logic to fix a storm of emotion. Instead, you learn the art of emotional discipline. That means you stop debating feelings. You stop justifying actions. You stop thinking you can fix chaos with reason. You begin to see that not every accusation requires a defense. Not every tear requires a fix. Not every conflict requires your logic. Sometimes, the most powerful response is acknowledgement without entanglement. You can look her in the eye and say, "I see this matters to you. Let's revisit it when we're both calm." That's not avoidance. That's emotional leadership. That's you taking responsibility for the outcome, not just the moment. The truth is, the more emotional a situation becomes, the less effective your logic will be. It's like yelling into the wind. It doesn't mean you're wrong, it means you're wasting energy. And over time, wasted energy becomes resentment. Resentment becomes withdrawal. Withdrawal becomes distance. And distance becomes disconnection. You think you're helping by explaining, but what you're actually doing is draining yourself in a war you were never supposed to fight. So how do you handle it? You listen, without trying to fix. You observe, without trying to argue. You validate her space to feel without sacrificing your own. You set boundaries, not to punish, but to protect the connection. And most importantly, you never use your logic to justify disrespect. If she's yelling, blaming, accusing, and refusing to hear you out, you leave the conversation. Not to be petty, but to preserve your peace. You come back when calmness returns. If it never does, you move on. Not because you're afraid of emotions, but because you refuse to live under them. This shift will change your life. You'll stop wasting time in pointless arguments. You'll stop burning mental energy defending truths that should be obvious. You'll stop expecting logic to heal emotion. Instead, you'll live in reality. A reality where your peace is non-negotiable, where your truth doesn't need defending, where your logic is used to build your life, not fight her feelings. That's how you rise. That's how you lead. That's how you stay free. Because real strength isn't found in winning debates. It's found in refusing to have them when they cost you your peace. Number 5. Lead the emotional tone. You walk into the house after a long day, focused, drained, carrying the weight of your goals and responsibilities, and before you can even exhale, you're hit with an emotional wave. Cold energy, passive aggression, maybe even a sarcastic comment or a full-blown emotional outburst. And in that instant, most men don't realize they're being handed a choice. Lead the emotional tone of this interaction or get swallowed by hers. And unfortunately, too many choose the second option. They match her energy, they raise their voice, they get sarcastic, they argue back, and in doing so, They throw away their power, their authority, and most importantly, their inner peace. But the man who understands emotional leadership, he doesn't react. He regulates. He walks into emotional storms like a lighthouse, not to join the chaos, but to shine clarity through it. Leading the emotional tone means that no matter what drama, disrespect, or dysfunction is thrown at you, your energy remains consistent. It means you become the thermostat, not the thermometer. Thermometers adjust to the environment. Thermostats set it. And this is one of the most attractive, rarest, and most powerful traits a man can possess in today's emotionally unstable world. Because let's face it, society doesn't reward emotional strength in men. It punishes it. It calls you cold when you don't overreact. It calls you controlling when you stay calm. It labels you emotionally unavailable when you set boundaries. But what society forgets is that real emotional strength isn't about being stoic on the outside, it's about staying sovereign on the inside. Most men are reactive. She raises her voice, he raises his. She gets emotional, he tries to outdo her. She cries, he panics. She attacks, he defends. And every time he does this, he loses a little more control over the moment. Not because he's wrong, but because he's not leading. Leadership doesn't mean dominance, it means direction. It means that when things go off the rails, you're the one who brings them back. When emotions flare up, you remain calm, not for her sake, but for yours. Because when you lead the emotional tone, you protect your mind, you protect your mission, you protect your identity. And that's not just powerful, that's essential. Think about it. The last time you lost your temper, what did it cost you? Respect, credibility, trust, peace, all of it. Now imagine being the kind of man who can sit in the fire and not sweat, who can hear accusations without responding in kind, who can feel the chaos rising but never lets it enter his spirit. That man doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to slam doors. He doesn't need to explain why he's right. His presence calms storms. His energy commands respect. His silence teaches more than lectures ever could. And it starts with one decision. I will not be led by her emotions. I will lead the energy of this space. From now on, when she gets emotional, you pause. You ground yourself. You check your tone. You remember that raising your voice isn't strength. It's weakness disguised as power. You remember that every time you match her emotional chaos, you hand her the reins to your peace. And peace is the most expensive currency you have. So you protect it, you lead with it, and you start practicing emotional leadership in every area of your life. When your coworker gossips, you don't join in, you shift the conversation. When your friend rants with no purpose, you redirect or disengage. When a stranger disrespects you, you respond with firm calmness. Not because you're soft, but because you've already won the moment. This level of emotional control is rare, and because it's rare, it's powerful. Women don't test emotional leaders, they test emotional followers. The more reactive you are, the more she'll push. Not because she's evil, but because on a deep subconscious level, she needs to feel safe. And if your emotions are easily swayed, you're not safe. You're unstable. But when she sees that nothing shakes you, not her mood, not her words, not her energy, she softens. She may resist it at first. She may accuse you of not caring. But over time, she realizes that the man who won't match her chaos is the only one capable of leading her out of it. And that's what emotional leadership does. It creates structure, direction, safety, respect. But it has to be consistent. You can't lead the emotional tone once a week and expect results. You can't be calm today and explosive tomorrow. You build this like a muscle by refusing to surrender to your first impulse, by creating space between stimulus and response, by making your presence synonymous with stability. This is how kings operate. They don't react to peasants throwing stones. They don't get flustered when the crowd boos. They don't let external noise disturb internal clarity. You are not obligated to entertain emotional theatrics. You are not required to defend your peace. You don't win arguments by being louder. You win by being unshakable. Lead the tone, lead the space, lead yourself, and the rest will follow. Number 6. Boundaries. Speak louder. You've been told to be understanding, to compromise, to meet her halfway. And you've tried. You've bent over backwards, explained your point of view, stayed in conversations you had no business being in, tolerated tone, disrespect, emotional swings. And what did it get you? More of the same. Because in relationships, especially today, boundaries are not optional, they're survival. And men who fail to enforce them will find themselves in partnerships where they're not partners but emotional servants. You think love means patience. She thinks love means compliance. You think giving her another chance is grace. She sees it as weakness. And every time you let her cross a line with no consequences, you're teaching her that your standards are flexible, that your words mean nothing, that your limits are suggestions. And what's worse is, she might not even realize she's doing it, but that doesn't matter. Because when you allow behavior to repeat, you co-sign it, you legitimize it, and now it's not her problem, it's yours. A woman will only respect the boundaries you enforce, not the ones you talk about. Not the ones you remind her of, the ones that come with consequences, loud, quiet, immediate and irreversible consequences. That doesn't mean yelling, that doesn't mean manipulation, that doesn't mean ego. It means action, consistent, firm, clear action. If she raises her voice, you walk away. If she disrespects you in public, you remove yourself. If she plays games, you stop playing. Because boundaries are not about controlling her, they're about controlling access to you. You are not responsible for her feelings about your standards. You are responsible for maintaining them regardless of her reaction. That's what leadership looks like. That's what self-respect looks like. Boundaries aren't just for the big things like cheating or abuse. They're for the daily things. The tone she uses when she's annoyed, the sarcasm she throws when she's insecure, the way she talks about you to her friends, the way she minimizes your goals or interrupts you when you speak. These things matter, they stack, and over time, they erode your confidence, your voice, your sense of self, until you wake up one day and don't even recognize the man in the mirror. That man used to have standards, used to have pride, used to say no. Now he just avoids conflict, and avoidance is not peace. It's self-abandonment with a smile. So you start enforcing, not to hurt her, but to save yourself. And if she respects it, you build something better. If she resists it, she was never meant for the version of you that's rising. Because the truth is, when you raise your standards, you force people to decide, evolve with you or exit, and either choice brings clarity. From this moment forward, your boundaries are no longer negotiable. You don't have to warn her. You don't have to explain them 5 times. You don't have to apologize for them. You live them, and those who can't meet them simply fall away. That's not loss. That's alignment. You don't need everyone in your life. You need the right people, the ones who respect you without needing reminders. The ones who hear your no and don't push. The ones who know that access to your time, energy and space is a privilege, not a birthright. You've spent too long being too available, too forgiving, too soft. And softness without boundaries is not kindness, it's weakness. And weakness invites manipulation, it invites disrespect, it invites pain. But strength? Strength closes doors, strength protects peace, strength walks away. And that's the man you become when your boundaries stop being ideas and start being actions. You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop explaining, you simply enforce, with silence, with space, with absence. And the moment you do, your world changes, because the moment you start protecting your peace, the world starts treating you differently. You become unmovable, unbreakable, untouchable by petty drama and emotional games. And the women who can't handle that, they leave. But the ones who can, they stay. not because you begged, but because they see you. A man with standards, a man with clarity, a man who refuses to live on his knees to make others comfortable. That's power, that's purpose, that's boundaries. And they don't require noise, just action, consistent, quiet, unshakable action. Let your life speak for itself. Let your standards filter your relationships. Let your boundaries do the talking. Because the loudest men are rarely heard, but the men with boundaries, they are remembered, respected, and never, ever ignored. Number 7, walk away with dignity. You're standing there, face to face with someone who once claimed to love you, and yet in this moment, all you feel is drained, disrespected, and emotionally used. Your voice has been silenced, your peace eroded, your self-respect chipped away slowly, day after day, in the name of keeping the relationship alive. And still, you hesitate to leave. Not because you don't know it's the right thing to do, but because somewhere deep inside, you've been conditioned to believe that walking away means failure, that you didn't try hard enough, that you're giving up too soon. But here's the truth. Staying in dysfunction doesn't make you strong. It makes you a prisoner of a false narrative, one where love means suffering, one where dignity must be traded for emotional scraps. And it's not just your heart that pays the price, it's your entire life. Your goals slow down, your focus disappears, your energy gets hijacked. You start second-guessing everything. You lose friends, momentum, and worse, you start to lose yourself. The man who once had ambition now spends hours trying to decode mixed signals. The man who once valued his peace now lives in silent tension. The man who once led his life now waits to see what mood she'll be in today. That's not love. That's bondage with a pretty name. And if you're reading this and it hits something inside you, something painful, something buried, then you already know what you need to do. But let's be clear. Walking away is not revenge. It's not punishment. It's a declaration that your sanity is worth more than potential, that your time is worth more than apologies that don't come, that your energy is not a donation to someone who can't even meet you halfway. And yes, it's hard, especially when you've invested so much, especially when the memories are tangled with your identity, especially when she knows how to cry just right, say the right words, pull you back just when you start to slip away. But remember this, emotional manipulation always comes disguised as redemption. She won't say, "I want to keep you small." She'll say, "You're leaving over something so little." She won't say, "I don't value you." She'll say, "You're too sensitive." She won't say, "I'm using your kindness." She'll say, "You don't care about us." And if you're not grounded, you'll believe her. You'll stay. You'll give it one more try. You'll silence your gut one more time. And in doing so, you'll push yourself one step closer to a life you no longer recognize. The power of walking away isn't just in the act. It's in what it teaches you. It teaches you that peace is a choice, that you don't owe anyone your suffering, that not every broken thing is worth fixing, that love without respect is just manipulation, that sometimes the most romantic thing you can do is leave. Because the man who stays when he knows he should leave isn't loyal. He's lost, and the world will not stop to save him. No one will knock on your door to remind you that you're wasting your prime years on dysfunction. No one will interrupt your breakdowns to tell you that your silence is not strength, it's surrender. You have to be the one who says, "This isn't working," the one who grabs his keys, his pride, and his future and walks out. Not in rage, not in drama, but in dignity. And yes, she might not chase, she might not cry, she might even celebrate your exit. That's not your concern. Your concern is becoming a man who no longer begs to be treated right, who no longer waits for someone to see his worth, who no longer mistakes pain for passion. Because the minute you walk away, truly walk away, you begin to heal, you begin to rebuild, you begin to remember who you were before her mood dictated your peace. Before her approval defined your confidence. Before her presence became your prison. And you learn something else too. You learn that nothing is worth more than your peace. No woman, no body, no promise, no history. You learn to value solitude over chaos, self-respect over validation. You learn that the love you were trying to force from her already lives inside you, buried under guilt, shame, and broken expectations. You just forgot, but you remember now. And with every step you take away from dysfunction, you get stronger, clearer, better. Until one day you wake up and the thought of returning to that dynamic doesn't even make sense. Not because you hate her, but because you love yourself. And that right there is the transformation. You're not running from her, you're returning to you. You're reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away too cheaply. And when you walk with that kind of purpose, you don't need to explain. Your absence explains everything. Your silence becomes your speech. Your peace becomes your answer. So walk away, not to escape her, but to find you. And once you do, don't look back. There's nothing there for you but a version of yourself who forgot what he deserved. Number 8. Actions trump arguments. You've spent hours, maybe even days, arguing, going in circles, explaining your intentions, your point of view, your love, your patience. You've broken things down with logic, begged for understanding, tried to make her see what you meant, and still, nothing changes. The same cycles, the same drama, the same accusations. And after all that, you realize something brutally true. Words don't mean shut if your actions don't match them. But what's even more powerful, when your actions do speak, they silence everything else. Because there's nothing louder, nothing more undeniable than a man who moves in certainty, in purpose, in strength. And in today's world, where everyone talks, where social media is flooded with people pretending to be wise, healed, masculine, where girls post soft life quotes while living in emotional war zones, your actions become the only truth. You say you value peace, show it. You say you won't tolerate disrespect, walk when it shows up. You say you love yourself. Start building your body, your mind, your future. Because the world doesn't care about what you say, it watches what you do. And when your actions are clean, consistent, and rooted in principles, people fall in line. They either rise to meet you or remove themselves, and either way, you win. But here's the hard part. Most men hide behind their words. They talk about goals but don't execute. They talk about boundaries but don't enforce them. They talk about respect but let it slide when emotions get involved. And they wonder why they're not taken seriously, why they keep getting disrespected, why their relationships crumble. It's because your woman doesn't hear your words, she watches your life. If you say, "I'm done with this behavior," and she does it again, and you stay, you just taught her that you're full of it. If you say, "I need space," and she invades it, and you let her, you just trained her to ignore you. But if you say nothing, and she crosses the line, and you disappear, that's a message. That's leadership. That's power. Your actions are your reputation. They're your credibility. They're your brand. And when you become a man whose actions align with his principles, everything changes. Your confidence grows. Your relationships shift. Your peace stabilizes. Because now you're no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth. They see it, they feel it, they adjust accordingly. This applies to everything. You want her to respect your focus. Stop explaining why you need time to work and just do it. Building, create. Move in silence, and when she sees the results, she'll either get on board or get gone. You want her to match your energy. Set the tone and stop negotiating. Be consistent, and if she can't meet you there, stop making exceptions. You want to be trusted. Be predictable. Be clear. Be the man who does what he says, even when no one's watching. Because your word only matters if it shows up in your behavior. And once that becomes your standard, your whole life levels up. You stop chasing, you stop arguing, you stop debating, you start building, you start moving, you start aligning. And now, instead of trying to explain your love, your value, your truth, you just embody it. And that embodiment? That's your shield, your sword, your peace. Because a man who acts with purpose doesn't need permission. He doesn't need to be validated. He doesn't need to be understood. He moves, and the world adjusts. So from this moment on, talk less. Move more. Set the standard and live it out. Don't wait for her to understand. Make her feel it in the way you move. Don't argue about boundaries. Just enforce them with action. Don't debate over respect. Carry yourself like someone who demands it. And the world will mirror that back to you. Because ultimately, people treat you the way your behavior trains them to. So stop explaining who you are. Start showing it. Let your work, your discipline, your peace, your silence, your decisions all speak on your behalf. That's the kind of man people remember. That's the kind of man women respect. That's the kind of man who doesn't argue, because his life is already the loudest statement he'll ever need. Every second you stay in confusion, in emotional chaos, in relationships that drain the very core of who you are, you trade your peace for pain, your power for approval, and your future for fleeting moments of comfort. Enough. If you're tired of being misunderstood, disrespected, tested, and emotionally manipulated, it's time to become the man who no longer plays that game. The Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men, linked in the comments, is the guide you were never given, the truth no one dared to say, the exact path from emotional servitude to sovereign self-respect. Once it's yours for life, a weapon of clarity that'll serve you in every relationship, every test, every decision. Don't wait until another year is wasted. Comment untouchable if you're ready to rise. Like this video, subscribe, and help more men escape silent suffering and save themselves from years of regret.